I realized because I started to kind of go over in my head what had happened. I realized because I was extremely fit. So I was in really good shape. I was in the best shape of my life, as a matter of fact, because my way of dealing with stress was exercise.
Mm.
And so I was in really good shape after going through that divorce. And then I also ate pretty good. Right. And
Mhm.
so I was like, and it just all led back to me not handling my stress and my self-care
Mhm.
and also losing that connection with myself after being in like such an abusive relationship.
Human Design reveals who you are energetically and who you came here to be. I'm Dana, Human Design Specialist.
And I'm Haley, the Human Design Newbie. Listen in as we explore how leaning into your authentic self is your ultimate path to success. Welcome to the Human Design Hive Podcast. Let's get into it.
Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Human Design Hive Podcast. I am Dana Phillips, your host, and starting this episode solo today because I do have a special guest with me today that I'll be sharing an interview with you. First of all, I just wanted to do a little update on what's been going on. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen I made a video last week. I've been rather sick, and so I apologize. I did not have an episode for y'all for the last 2 weeks, and it's ironic because when I got sick, I just finished with editing this interview that I did with my guest, Tina, and I was very excited to share it because, well, she's a mindset, success, and self-care coach. And we had this great conversation about taking care of yourself and, having to slow down and listen to the body. And then I listened to it all again as I edited it. And then a couple days later, before I finished my editing, I got so sick. I ended up getting diagnosed with pneumonia. And I spent the next 2 weeks really just on my couch or sleeping or just trying to get through the day. Is honestly the sickest I've been in a while. And I find it ironic that it happened after I was getting ready to release this great conversation about listening to your body and taking care of yourself and how sometimes you're forced to do that, which I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. So anyways, I am back in the podcast saddle, so to speak, getting ready to bring y'all more content. So I'm picking it back up where I left off with introducing to you my guest today, Tina Stinson. As I said, Tina is a mindset, success, and self-care coach that I was on her podcast last year. And back over the Christmas break, I shared that episode with y'all if you want to go back and listen to it first, where she interviewed me on her podcast, which is the Soul Aligned Self-Care Podcast. She brings in lots of guests from all different kinds of healing modalities and practices, and shares with her audience different ways that you can integrate these practices into your life to help take care of yourself and become more aligned. She started on this journey after having her own health crisis at the age of 39, and was, like I said, forced into time by herself to really figure out, what was going on in her life and what it was that she was going to do to help get herself back and to get her health back to where she wanted it. She found herself in a position where it was all on her, and she figured it out. And now she does the work through coaching and her podcast of teaching others about how to do that and what's most important, and this 11-step self-care practices that she teaches inside of her own program, the Soul Aligned Self-Care Intensive, which she has a special offer for you, so make sure you stay till the end. Anyway, so I'm very excited to share this interview with you with Tina Stinson. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk to you after. Well, hello there, Tina. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
I know it's so nice to see you again. And I'm so glad that you're now here on my podcast because back, I think it was February of last year or March, somewhere around there, I was on your
Hmm.
podcast, which was a lot of fun. Got to talk
Yes.
about human design. And so I did, for the listeners out there, I did recently release on my podcast our conversation that we had. And at that time, I was like, oh, I'd really love to bring you on so we could talk more about what it is that you do and really your journey and how your design has played out in your life as well. So, why don't you, if you don't mind, just as we get started, could you tell everybody a little bit about your background, kind of where you're coming from? Because there's another event that happened in your life that put you in another path, but kind of tell us real quick where you were before that happened.
Yes. So I had a stroke at the age of 39 that was caused by stress. And before that happened, I was many, many years ago, a, well, actually, I was going to say I was a realtor, but even before that, before the stroke, I was a mom of three kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was in a very abusive relationship. So it was
Mhm.
very verbally abusive. And so my self-confidence and everything was completely diminished. I had absolutely zero self-confidence, and I was very, very stressed. And so that's what led into the stroke, really. And
Mhm.
it was like a series of very dramatic and I would say some unexpected steps that kind of led me into it. And it started with my ex-husband getting extremely ill. He had Guillain-Barré, which is very rare. And
I'm familiar. I know someone that has that. Yes.
yeah, so he ended up in the ICU for like 8 weeks. And during that time period, I learned a lot about my ex-husband that was not so pleasant. So I learned about like he was had a whole nother life with another person.
Oh,
I
wow.
learned that the people I had to deal very closely with his job because he had to get like different types of insurance to cover him. And so I learned that they didn't even know he was married. They didn't know he had kids.
Oh,
I learned about a lot of money he was hiding from me. And
oh,
so,
wow.
like, it was uncovered all of this stuff. And so I had to go through this process with him of helping care for him while learning all this stuff. And then also having his family move into my household. And at the same time, we were in the process of moving, selling our house and moving to another state that was supposed to be a move that we had to make in order for him to keep his job. But I learned that it was a lateral move. He just wanted to move there. And the house had just sold right when he went into the hospital.
Hmm.
And we were in the process of purchasing another home in another state. And
Hmm.
so there was like all of these very stressful, like life moment things that continued to happen from that point that led into the stroke over a period, I would say years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was extremely stressful. So stressful that I lost all the hair in the front of my head. Like it
Mm.
was just a lot. I had to take care of three children while this was all going on. It was difficult.
So was he still under your care, like medically, let's say, dependent on you when you had the stroke as well?
Absolutely not. I had the stroke. It was almost kind of like, as soon as I was able to exhale, that's when I had the
Mm.
stroke, you know?
Mm.
So he had come home in a wheelchair. I'd help him learn how to kind of like do stuff again. Like he had to learn how to walk and he just really had to gain his strength back after when you're paralyzed for that long, you lose all your muscle mass. I knew I was going to divorce him. I didn't tell him that. I just knew I had to get back close, back into the state where I came from. So I was near family because his
Hmm.
family was very unsupportive. I think they knew about his affair and this other person. And so they were trying to like protect him from me, actually. And so I knew I had to get him to move. So I got him to move back to the state where we were from. So I was close to my family. I filed for a divorce. I'm oversimplifying the whole process. It
Yes.
was really difficult,
Of
like
course.
even before I moved out of my house, he moved this person into my house. Like Her
Oh my
stuff was
gosh.
moving into my closet as I'm
Oh
still
my
living there.
gosh.
Yeah, it was really, it
It's
was,
like something you just read about. That I can't believe that.
it
That's
was
just, oh my
intense. It was
gosh.
really intense. It was really hard on my kids. I ended up purchasing a house and moving into the house with my kids, and he didn't really want any part of them. So it was kind of like
Wow.
just me and the kids. He did spend some time with them, but it was almost, I felt like I was forcing him to do it. But then that's when I had the stroke. It was almost like I was able to exhale and then I had the
Mm-hmm.
stroke. And what happened was it was a vertebral dissection, which is
Mm-hmm.
the artery in my neck, the
Mm-hmm.
inside lining tore. And that's really what caused the stroke. So it wasn't a stroke from like, like what people typically think of, like a clogged artery or something like that. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually just from all that stress. I actually literally popped a vein in my neck, and then it clotted up, and then that
Wow.
caused a stroke. And the reason why I didn't have a lot of damage is because you have two vertebral arteries that serve
Mm-hmm.
the blood supply to the brain. And so it's kind of like a momentary stroke because then the other artery kind of takes
Mm-hmm.
over. I had a clot go into my brain, and I had to basically, they couldn't do surgery. It was too dangerous. So I had to sit still for 8 weeks and like, yeah, they were basically like, don't do anything, sit still. It
Oh
had
my
me wearing a
gosh.
neck brace. They told me to sleep on my back, which was, I thought was so funny because I literally would wake up on my stomach in like a weird position with my neck all twisted. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to die, like,
Well, of
so
course, yeah,
yeah.
they tell you that. So their remedy. Okay, so they said just you need to be still for how long did you just say?
Eight
8 weeks.
weeks. That's how long it takes
Oh
an
my gosh.
artery to heal. That's what they told me at the time. I don't know how accurate
Wow.
that is. Some of the stuff they tell you when you're in the hospital is ridiculous.
Yeah. And so during that 8 weeks, so you were 39 at the time? Is that what you
Yes.
said? So how old were your children?
My oldest was moving into her like younger teen age years, and then my two youngest were like 5, 7,
How
and
in the world did you manage that?
my mom
Oh,
came and stayed with me and took care of my
wow.
kids, which was an amazing sacrifice for her to like leave. We didn't live close, it was like a
Yeah.
2.5 hours apart. So she came and it was a summer because I had the stroke in May. And so she spent the entire summer with me. And
Gosh, and they were home from school and everything.
yeah, it was really difficult for her. It was really difficult for me to watch my mom parenting my kids and me just
Hmm.
being like, it was impossible.
Helpless.
It was
Yeah. So
impossible.
so I imagine you had those 8 weeks with nothing to do.
Yeah.
And is this where you started to like make this shift or start to prioritize your own self-care?
Yeah, I realized because I started to kind of go over in my head what had happened. I realized because I was extremely fit. So I was in really good shape. I was in the best shape of my life, as a matter of fact, because my way of dealing with stress was exercise.
Mm,
And so I was in really good shape after going through that divorce. And then I also ate pretty good. And
hmm.
so I was like, and it just all led back to me not handling my stress and my self-care,
Hmm.
and also losing that connection with myself after being in like such an abusive relationship. And I want to also like say it was verbally abusive. And I want to make that very clear because a lot of people don't realize how damaging that is because it's
Oh
almost
yeah.
like this invisible abuse, but it's so
Hmm.
damaging. And so I had lost a connection with myself, including the connection with the messages that my body sends to me, like you're tired, you're stressed. And I
Yeah.
was unable to recognize that because being a single mom, I didn't work for 13 years, and then I was thrown into just working and having to support my kids. And so the quickest thing I thought I could do was become a realtor. I don't know, of all things. It was like, okay, I can go to school for a week and I can get my realtor's license. And that's what I did. And I started selling real estate. Um, and it really, I never liked selling real estate. I absolutely hated it. I always say I'm too soft for real estate. I really am. I'm way too soft for real estate. They ate me alive for 15 years. I did it for 15 years,
Oh wow.
but it really did serve its purpose. Like it made it possible for me to never have to put my kids in daycare and to be able to try to keep their life as normal as possible after the divorce and still have me around to support them and spend time with them. And it wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong. I made so many mistakes, but it really was a great solution for an impossible situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you are reflecting and you're seeing that you have been neglecting yourself and that it was more than just eating well and exercising, because I know that that's a lot of what I think we have seen or thought in the past was self-care, right? But it goes
Yeah.
much deeper than that. So,
Yes.
because now you are, I mean, you have your podcast is this self-aligned self-care podcast, right? I said that right.
Soul
Soul
aligned.
aligned. Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that's
Soul
okay.
aligned, which is about self-care. It goes deeper than just the physical. It's the soul.
Yes.
And so where did you start when you realized that you needed to cultivate a more loving and nurturing relationship with yourself? You've done so much taking care of others, which is, I can see in your design why that would be, which I'll mention real quick for everybody out there that is curious. Tina is a 6'2" profile, and she's a pure sacral generator. And so you could, kind of hear some of these themes that might be going in your life that had led you down this path, being emotionally undefined and also an undefined G center and undefined will center. These are things that, are looking for identity or trying to make everybody around you happy because it can feel uncomfortable, to that undefined emotional center. It can feel uncomfortable because you're feeling everybody's emotions more. But really that G center, which is the center of identity and direction, even though you have a defined spleen, your instincts are good, your like survival instincts are good. I could see how someone could potentially come along and manipulate that part of you because you're looking for someone who will love you and help give you direction. That's a very broad overview of the undefined G center, but it can be, someone can mess with your identity, I think, in a way. But I wanted to hear more about where you started. I just wanted to make sure people heard that first and put it in context. Because now you teach people how to do this. So where did you start? What was one of the first things that you started practicing or doing?
Well, the first thing I did was I got a certification as a holistic health coach. And the reason I chose that certification was because it was holistic, meaning like it involved every part of my being. And I thought that's what I really needed to explore. I have to say, like when I first started this path, I did not know where to start. I was so lost. I was so disconnected with myself. And what you just described in my human design is just so perfect. Like it's so aligned with me, really. And so that was how I started the health coach route, and learning all those little things I learned in that certification was definitely a stepping stone. And working with people as a health coach, I realized it became even more clear that everything is on a deeper level, everything. And so my journey kind of like expanded into life coaching, because I felt you can't be a health coach unless you're a life coach, because you're dealing with all these issues. Nothing when it comes to eating and your health and stuff like that, it has nothing to do with the eating and the health. It has to always do with what's on the inside and your mindset. And so I went very, very messily all over the place over the period of probably 5 to 10 years, just exploring all these different places. And then the creation of my bootcamp, which is the Soul Aligned Self-Care Bootcamp, and my 11 different practices that I teach in there, was me kind of looking back in hindsight at what worked and what really served its purpose and what I still do in my life on a daily basis. And that's how it was created. It wasn't like these perfect little aligned steps that I took. Like it never works out that way, right? You're always kind of like learning as you go along and trying different things and seeing what's worked. And I could never have planned that journey that I took over those years, ever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in so many ways, what you just described really is, your example of your profile is a 6-2 profile. Are you familiar with that life, like kind of life path of a 6-2? Are you familiar with that at all?
Not really, no,
Yeah.
very basically.
Well, the and you're a generator. A generator is, we're responding to life all the time, and you're a sacral generator, so it is a lot of yes, no, this is right. But generators do have these stair step learning curves where they, maybe gain mastery in one thing, and like, at least that was my experience. So like, oh, this is it because I'm being led in this direction, and then that would kind of run its course, and I'd be like, it's not quite it. What's something else? You keep like adding
Hmm.
on to it. Well, what's this and what's that? And so as a 6-2, and it's really interesting, all this happened around, started around 39, 40. So a 6-2, the line 6 has a triphasic life cycle where it's like the first 29, 30 years of life are a more experimental phase in life, as in, maybe trying lots of different jobs or different careers or different relationships, moving around to different places, just kind of sampling life. And
Hmm.
then they say that the middle part from about 30 to about 50 is when line sixes go up on the roof, they call it, where it's a time for healing. It's a time for kind of pulling back and observing how other people or how other ways of doing things, in the sense that you've kind of tried a lot of different things and hadn't really found, the one thing for you. And so it just kind of pulls back into this observing and healing time in your life, which spreads to about your Chiron return around 50, which you're now, if you don't mind me sharing, you're 55. And so it seems like you said, oh, this 5 or 10 year period where I just kind of saw what other people did, but then also I realized, I had to look back and take all that, and this is how I did it, which so exemplifies the 6-2, because the 2 part of your personality is this natural learner who just kind of can, yes, observe what others do, but has to kind of process everything themselves, make meaning of it themselves, see how they are going to do that. And then, of course, as a role model, after 50, you come off the roof, they call it. And it's just who you are now is the role model being. It's like, hey, I've tried this. I've seen how other people have done it. And this is how I am going to be expressing who I am. This is me. And it's just like what you just said, that it was just a beautiful encapsulation of how you've come up with these processes to then now teach others, because 6-2s are just natural. You guys are here to teach and lead and inspire. And so I just love that. So can you tell us what some of these processes are? Do you have a step by step, or is it just kind of, it's a lot of things you can sample this or that? Kind of explain that to me.
Yeah, it is kind of a step by step, but it's not necessary to go in a certain order, although it
Mhm.
can be helpful. So inside of the bootcamp, there's 3 different areas. There's like I call it a reset. So it's a reset of your mindset, a reset of your body, and
Mhm.
then a reset of like your soul. And
Mhm.
so and the reset of the mindset is probably like the bulk of the program. And I usually start out by acknowledging your starting point and defining your core values. And the reason why this is so important is because you can't really get to where you want to go unless you know where you are and
Mhm.
acknowledge where you are. And it's not about any kind of judgment or anything like that. It's really just acknowledging what you've been through. Everybody has a different starting point. And just like when you set a GPS, you always need that starting point. Like if you're going to go to New York to LA, you need to know that you're in New York. You can't just be like, I want to go to LA and just hope that the GPS gets you there. So you have to know
Mhm.
your starting point. And the core values are important because you really need to know what you stand for. You really need to define that. It's a great way to reflect back when you're going through different things in your life and say, these are my core values. I need to like and pay attention to whether you're living around those core values or not. And if you're not, to make some adjustments, right? And so
Mhm.
that's the starting point. And then I go into decluttering of the mind, the space, and the processes. And this is so important because it helps reduce the stress, anxiety, and any type of frictions in your life. And it's one of my favorite things to do because I just love like getting into the nitty-gritty of things and looking at things so closely and taking all these small little steps and these small little actions to make small improvements because you have these gigantic changes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of my like favorite things. And then the next thing is usually setting and maintaining boundaries, which I always call the foundation of deep level self-care, because none of this stuff is really going to work for you if you don't know how to have boundaries and how to maintain them. And
Mm-hmm.
this is like a big thing for most people. I find the boundaries for me, I had no boundaries when I first started, nothing. Yeah. And it took me a long time to really learn how to do that. Then I go into like reframing, which is like reframing life experiences, you know, so it's about looking at different things that you've experienced or are experiencing and learning from them and kind of learning how to respond to life instead of react, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like the mindset section. Then in the body section, it's really about learning how to fill your body with healthy food. This, the health coach comes out of me. I'm also a culinary nutrition educator. And so this is just something that I love doing, but it's very helpful because if you're eating a lot of crap, it causes a lot of friction, right, in your bodies, and it causes you to feel, you know, not well. And it's so hard to create some sort of balance and flow in your life when you're eating really crappy food. And then the next thing in the body section, the next thing in the body section is learning how to manage your emotions. And this is really about, it's so important. Something that I had to really relearn was allowing myself to feel my emotions, but then allowing them to pass through me and move on. And it was a really important thing for me. And I'll never forget the day I decided to just let myself, I always call it having the pity party, right? Because I would always like fight it. And I always had to be strong. That's like the single mother of three. I always had to be strong. It was very masculine, right? Yeah. And I never allowed myself to be weak ever, right? And so I remember allowing myself to be like, I just need to like really feel sorry for myself right now.
Yeah.
You know, I need to sit on the couch and be pathetic and just cry. And I was like, I'm going to give myself a day. Yeah. So I called it the pity party. I gave myself the day. And then I realized the next day I felt like brand new. Right. And I was like,
just heard that somewhere else too recently, where it's like, okay, you're just gonna you took a day, some might need just to get it out, just sit there and be like, because we can't hide from our emotions, because if you keep tamping that down, that's kind of what led you to where you had gotten, was always tamping it down. And I love what you said just now about the emotions and learning to let things flow through you, because that is like such a key teaching for someone with a undefined solar plexus such as yourself, because that's the emotional center, and people who are emotionally defined can feel very emotional, like the intensity is there, because where you're undefined is where you're receiving, reflecting back to people, amplifying, reflecting it back. And that's a key teaching, is to learn that a lot of times the intensity and everything you're feeling, a lot of it may not even be your own, and to allow yourself to be, my teacher always said, a screen and not a sponge, to just let it pass through and then reset. And, what am I actually feeling? What is me? What is not? But also just to not hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really important. And sometimes, sometimes I'll just be really, really sad for apparently no reason. Like I'm like, and I used to just like be like, okay, Tina, I don't know what's wrong with you. Just move on.
Look for meaning. We always try to find why, and for emotionally undefined, it may be the person you ran into at the grocery store. Yeah. Or, for a person who's emotionally defined, you might just be in a low and it'll just pass,
Yeah.
So in general, for all of us to learn to just feel the emotions and let them just ride. and
Yeah.
not dwell on them too much.
It saves so much energy. I'm all about energy, right? So it's
Hmm.
like when you're fighting it, like, why am I sad? Why is this happening to me? And then
Hmm.
like spending like hours and hours in your day just discussing with yourself in your
Yeah.
head, why am I sad?
Going
And
over all the things that could be wrong.
yeah, it's such a waste of energy and time. And instead, I was just like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like, maybe I'll just watch a sad movie and cry for a little while, and
Yeah.
then I'll just move on. And that's what I do now. Like, I'm just like, I don't need to explain it. I'm also a middle-aged woman, and like my
Hmm.
hormones are insanely crazy right now. So I'm like,
Hmm.
maybe it's just that. I don't even
Yeah.
know. Like, I don't know what it is, but I'm just gonna feel it, and then I'm just gonna move on. And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to mean anything. And I
Hmm.
feel like it goes back to like also the reframing is
Hmm.
like learning how to just respond instead of react continuously, right? When you're
Hmm.
reacting, you're just all over the place. So
Hmm.
I feel like that is really, really important. And learning how to process those feelings is good too. Like what helps me when I'm sad? Like what helps
Hmm.
me when I'm angry? And everybody is different. So there's a
Hmm.
different recipe for every person, what's going to help them. So that's whole part of the process. And then going into like the soul, resetting the soul, I go into like connecting with your intuition, which is something I kind of lost that connection with myself. So
Hmm.
it's about connecting and deepening that, raising your vibration, learning that you don't need to go from sad to joy. Like you could just be neutral. You don't
Hmm.
have to take these huge leaps. As a matter of fact, I think it's impossible to take these huge leaps.
Hmm.
It's like trying to make a right turn when you're going 100 miles an hour in a car, kind of.
Yeah.
So, um, creating and deepening your self-love is something I really had to work on. So that's another section. Just learning how to accept yourself exactly as you are, at the same time wanting to improve yourself. So how do you do that?
Hmm.
Gratitude is a
Wow,
whole section.
that's a really, yeah, wait a minute, you just said that and kind of went past it, but wow, that's a really, I've never really thought of it that way, of like accepting yourself but still wanting to improve yourself, like what
Hmm.
that looks like.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we do hear that all the time, to accept yourself for who you are, but then also it's like, how do you improve it? That's interesting. I really like that you said that.
Well, yeah, it's like it's human nature to always want to expand, right? So
Hmm.
we're always wanting to improve. As soon as we reach a goal, we're like, what's next? Like
Yeah.
so it's just human nature to want and to be able to love yourself as you are right now, but then also accept the fact that of course, you still want to get better, is
Hmm.
something that some people think that it has to be one or the other, and it,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, yeah, I guess if you're starting from a place of love and acceptance, it is not, because a lot of times, especially as this airs, it'll be around February, and people have gone through like the New Year's Eve resolutions, and so much of what they think is improving, they're actually thinking about fixing, like there's something wrong,
Hmm.
and creating from that place of I'm not good enough, or I can't do it, I'm weak, or all those things, is not a good foundation for
Absolutely not.
change.
No, it's about really embracing. I truly believe that everything that we are is meant to be, and
Hmm.
we learn from that. We
Hmm.
all have all these little imperfections, and I look at a lot of my imperfections also as it's like my goal.
Hmm.
It's like I can be very naive. I don't know, I can't change that. I've always been very naive, but it also makes me the type of person that I am, this very caring person
Hmm.
and very positive person. And I don't think that's a negative thing, right?
Mm-mm. No,
And
it's
so,
not. And when you say naive, it's interesting that you use the term naive, because that's usually like, oh, I should know better, or you try to see the best in people, kind of thing, is what I assume you're
mhm,
saying.
yes.
But really, that is also, I believe, a function of this undefined G center, because an undefined G center, because our undefined areas are where we are becoming wise, because we're learning through our interactions with others how these energies present and the themes that are there. And an undefined G center literally can tap into the heart of who other people are, and you can literally see the potential of someone, and you can also see how it is they see themselves at times. And so you can tend to fall in love with people for their potential, right? And that can maybe to you sound like come off as that, the word naive, but you're talking
Hmm.
about the boundaries too. But
Yeah.
it's not being necessarily naive. It's really a function of who you are, of being able to connect with people in that way. And it's there, like it says in A Course in Miracles, it's like only the love remains. Like love is real,
Hmm.
everything else is not. And so even if someone shows you this less than ideal side of themselves, just say it nicely, there is anything that was love was real. And it's
Hmm.
something that I think that you are naturally attuned to, of being able to connect in that way. And it can be hard when people don't, live up to their potential.
Yes, I automatically assume everybody is just going to think the same way I do. Like
Yeah.
it's just something that happens, and I'm like, and I'm 55, so it's not going to change. It's just how I am. So,
Yeah.
but I think because I am like that, I learn so much,
Mm-hmm.
and it's made it so I could really look at people, like you said, that aren't really favorable people in my life, and I could really look at them and see a part of myself in them. It's almost like,
Yes.
why are they being that way? And I'm like, why would I be that way? And then maybe if I was feeling this way, that's why I would be that way. And then I can
Yeah.
almost come back and have empathy for these people. And it's just a better perspective than just being like, about, about
Yeah.
someone.
Because you can understand why that is. Yeah. That's
Hmm.
so interesting. So, okay. So are you still, we've been talking so many, we're still in the 11. You've gone over
Yeah,
11.
that's all of them. Yeah,
Okay.
gratitude and
Oh,
forgiveness were the
gratitude.
last two. So like gratitude is I put that at the end
Hmm.
because it's just one of the most powerful practices that could really help. I feel like it's free. Like
Yeah.
if I had to give anybody some kind of a prescription to solve stress, anxiety, overwhelm, burnout, I'd be like gratitude. Like if something quick
Hmm.
and easy, gratitude would be it. Because once you work on gratitude,
Yeah.
and there's a right and a wrong way to do it, I believe, because people might say, okay, well, I write three things down I'm grateful for every morning, but I feel like you really have to, it's more about the feeling, being in the feeling of gratitude. It's not about just writing down what you're grateful for. It's about
Hmm.
why am I grateful for that? How does it make me feel, And I always think of whenever I really need to feel grateful, I always think of my kids because like it automatically like puts a smile on my face. It makes me really like it's something
Hmm.
I'm genuinely really grateful for. And
Hmm.
you can't be in a state of stress or anxiety when you're in a state of gratitude. And so
Yeah.
it's like an instantaneous way of really calming your body. And
Hmm.
so and then the last one is forgiveness of yourself and others. And I put that last because when you're at the beginning of your journey, forgiveness is very difficult. It's very hard to forgive yourself. It's very
Hmm.
hard to forgive others. But at the end of this, it's so much easier to look at forgiveness and embrace
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's so
that's
true.
all of them.
Well, it's so funny because it's not funny. It's beautiful. As you were going through these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, it really makes sense. Mainly that you start your where you started with values and knowing what you value and what's important and what is like almost your non-negotiables, all those things. That is clearly to me an expression of your sun energy, where the sun was, what gate it was in when you were born, which is gate 50, which is in the spleen center. It's the center of intuition and instinct and survival. But 50 is the gate of values.
Oh, wow. That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
and it is about upholding the values of the tribe. It's in this channel of energy that is more of that nurturing mother energy, in the sense that for values, the way it describes it in the human design sense in the I Ching, is the values of the tribe, of when everyone is fed and clothed and taken care of, then we all thrive. But it is knowing what is it you want to teach your children? What is it you want to carry forward? What is it we hold dear? And I just love that is where you start, is with that piece, because that is such a huge part of who you are. And also the reframing and the, changing the narrative, I guess, in a way, is how it would be, is also a big expression in your design. It's your unconscious, they call it, the design side of your chart, in your moon, which is gate 33. It's a throat gate, but it is about reframing and how do you want to tell the story, because we all tell ourselves stories, right? And that's the thing, you always think that Abraham Hicks, belief is just something that something you continue to think, a thought you continue to think. And how can we change that? You could have stayed stuck in that narrative of victim. Absolutely. I mean, that you were able to come back from that. I mean, it's such a huge betrayal, and someone really trying to dismantle who you are, that you were able to bring that back. It's just really, really impressive and inspiring. And
that was a huge step, that reframing thing. It sounds so small and everything, but it was really a huge shift for me, because I was definitely in victim mode. I was a victim. Like, I could acknowledge that I was a victim, but I realized that no one was coming to help me. Like, people loved me, but they couldn't fix it, so it took me a long time. I'm not going to lie. I spent so many years in victim mode, like way too many years in victim mode. And so I love helping people get out of victim mode, because I spent too long there, and I hate to see someone else spend too much time there, because once you're out, you're like, oh yeah, okay. It's a shift. It's a hard shift.
But, like you said, you can't just, go 90 miles an hour and take a right-hand turn. This was a long time, somebody that, did this, or, you were in this relationship so long, and, it is hard to come out of that. But the point is that you did it. I mean, the universe did kind of have to stop you in your tracks.
Yeah, they were like, "Oh my God, Tina, wake up. Like, come on now." I think I was in that relationship for 20 years. So it was, because we were together before we got married. And so, it was a long period of time. And yes, it was gradual. It wasn't like everybody always questions, why do people stay in relationships like that? And I understand that, because it's so gradual. And when you're dealing with like a narcissist, you really like question yourself. You're like, am I crazy? And another process that happens when you're with a narcissist is you become isolated from your family and from your friends. And so you have nothing to really validate whether you're crazy or not. So you just like start to believe that it's you, and it's hard to get out of.
I totally know what you mean. I have an incredibly dear friend of mine that had the same, not for 20 years, but it was about 5 years, that I watched from beginning to end. I watched it happen in real time. And I could not believe how someone could take this most beautiful, heart-centered, smart, intelligent, funny woman and totally shred her identity of who she thought she was. Like, the conversations we would have, the way she was seeing herself, I couldn't believe it, because on the outside, and I could tell her that too, but she couldn't hear it, because they have such a hold on you. And it is incredibly abusive.
It's crazy, because like I said, it's the invisible abuse. And it's, I was like this strong, like very independent, very feminist, like staunch feminist, never getting married. I'm never having kids. So interesting. So it's incredible how quickly that can be depleted. And it has nothing to do. I think that the narcissist personality is attracted to a certain type of personality, a certain type of person. And that's really all that was, that connection between us. And I was very young when I met him. And so I really hadn't really completely defined who I was yet, when I got married, got married at 24 and then had my first child at 25, and so I look at my children now and I'm like, oh my God, can
I
I
know.
imagine? Like,
I know my daughter's now, she'll be 27 in February and no, March. And I think, oh my gosh, when I was 27, I already had her,
yeah.
and I got married at 23 too. And my son's now 24. I look at them like, no, you're not old enough to make these decisions.
I know. I can't imagine. I can see, like, my oldest daughter's 30. I could definitely see her being, all my kids are, if they choose to become parents, I don't know if they
Hmm.
will, they
Hmm.
will be great parents. They're all pet
Yeah.
parents. So I could see their parenting styles with their
Yeah.
pets. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think about some of the things I was doing at their age and I'm like, wow,
I
you know,
know. I know.
so.
Well, I could keep talking to you forever. I appreciate you so much for sharing those 11 points. And you said that this is what you are sharing in your boot camp. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Is that something people can join anytime, or how? Tell us a little bit about that real quick before we have to
Yes, they
wrap up.
could they could join at any time. Certain times of the years I do run specials and
Hmm.
but they could join at any time. There's a module for everything I went through. There's a module for each one of those and there's a video, there's worksheets, there's all the things like that. But I do monthly coaching inside of there. So every
Hmm.
month I go live. You could submit questions for me to answer. I
Hmm.
answer all the questions. And so there's always going to be the support and the guidance, right?
Hmm.
I wanted to make it that way because I want people to have success. So even if they go on there and they go into the online portal and they watched every video and they feel like they can't really implement this stuff, I'm
Hmm.
there for them to help them implement all of it, right?
Hmm.
And so right now I created a coupon for your listeners
Okay.
and so
Awesome.
they can get a discount. So I'll share that with you. And so, there's a payment plan option, and there's also a pay in full. The coupon is only good for the pay in full, only
Hmm.
because like the technicalities of me setting up something like
Hmm.
that, I just don't know how to do it. I would have did it,
Yeah.
but I don't know how. So anyway, yeah. So there's a lot of fun stuff inside of the program that I also put all the master classes I do inside there. So there's just like multiple master classes. And then there's also all the past coaching recordings in there. So you could go through all of those recordings and you
Wow.
could really spend a lot of time in there. So it's definitely what I call my like life's work. I just love the boot camp. I am going to be renaming it in the new year because
Hmm.
I realize that boot camp is probably not the right word for someone who's stressed out and
Yeah.
yeah, so I am going to be changing the name, but it's probably just going to be called the Soul Aligned Self-Care Intensive
Hmm.
instead of boot camp because that just feels kinder and more appropriate.
Hmm.
But as I said, I'll give you the link for that and share the coupon for them, and it'll be good for a while, the end of February.
And so what's just, people that want to Google right away or they want to get on it, where can they find you? Like, what's your website? What's your social media? We know that you have the uh, soul
So,
aligned self-care, right? Have I got it?
podcast, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I can
It's a
see it in my
mouthful.
head and I can't
Yeah,
get the words to come out right. I'm sorry. I can see
yeah.
the cover, all of it. I love it. Where you share a lot of these practices. I think you've gone through, you have an episode on
Each
touching on
one.
each of these points, right?
Yes,
And then
yeah.
you also are bringing in other guest speakers to, talk about some of these practices that help support that journey, which I've been trying to dig into each one of those, but I
Yeah,
love
there's some
hearing
fun ones on
all the
there.
different, yeah, all the different things that people do. And so there's the podcast. So where else can they find you?
So my website is basically my name.com, tinastinson.com. You could find everything there. The
Mhm.
boot camp, the podcast, everything's there. I also have a new skincare company that kind of
Oh.
combines skincare with self-care. And
Mm.
so I'm
You have
doing,
beautiful skin. I'm looking at you.
oh,
You've been glowing
thank
this whole
you.
time.
Thank you. It's so nice of you. Yeah, I just started that. And it's really funny. I was doing this reset program with a couple of clients. I think it
Hmm.
was the beginning of last year. And we create like this like dream big wish list. And I was kind of doing it with them. And
Hmm.
I had been it's kind of like a hobby. I do all my own skincare. I love like essential oils and stuff like that. And so I love doing all that stuff and I'm always creating something, but I never really shared it. And I had always been thinking of it for a long time. And so that was one of my things that I wanted to implement. So like because of my reset course that I did for other people, I started the skincare company and it's called Soul Aligned Infusions, right? And so it's a lot of fun because I incorporate the skincare with self-care practices. So there's a website. When you buy anything from me, you get access to a website that has like breath work videos and meditations and stuff like that to help reduce stress and anxiety.
That is so awesome. And it is the way of the future. You're on the leading edge for sure.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. So do we get your socials too? Is it at
Tina, usually on most of the socials. So I like to spend time on Instagram. I'm not a huge Facebook person. I'm on there, but it would be Tina Stinson Coach.
Okay.
So I'm Tina Stinson Coach almost everywhere, or Coach Tina Stinson.
Well, I'm sure people will be looking you up because everything you shared today is so valuable. And as I said, you're such an embodiment of your design, and your journey has really shown that even when it seems impossible, there is always a way to take control for yourself and create the life that you really want to be living. And so appreciate you being here. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, actually, I just want to thank you for having me. I always love talking to you. I love human design. It's so interesting how aligned it is with my life. And I just have to dig into your podcast more. I have to like really get in there. Yeah, it's so interesting.
It is fun. It always shows up. Well, thank you so much for being here, and everybody go check out Tina. You have a great day, Tina. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Well, there you have it, the interview with Tina. And I'm just blown away by the experience that she has gone through, and to carry herself forward after so many trials and challenges in her life to make something so beautiful out of it. And it just really shows her heart really shines through in everything she does. And I'm so excited to have shared this interview with you. And so just wanted to let you know that she does have the Soul Aligned Self-Care Intensive, the program she was offering before. And as a listener of the Human Design Hive podcast, she's offering a coupon code there for everybody. You can use that on checkout, and that will give you $111 off the price of the intensive. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. And so please go out, check everything that Tina does. Go to the Soul Aligned Self-Care Podcast. It's really great. She has so many great guests on there, like I said. And I'm just so thrilled to have had her here today. So I want to thank you all once again for listening to us, and we will see you or talk to you or share with you in the next episode. Take care for now. Bye. You made it all the way to the end of today's episode, so you must have liked what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and perhaps leave us a good review. And if you know someone who wants to dig into all things human design with us, make sure you share the Human Design Hive podcast with them. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for listening.